Om Indram Mitram Vranamagni Mataratu Diviha Sasuparno Gurutaman Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vedantiyagnim Yaman Matarishvanamahu Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. To that one, indivisible, immutable, supreme being, the sages and seers assign many a noble title. Like the friend of all beings, the eternal companion, the waters of life, the fire of yoga, the divine atmosphere, the carrier of consciousness, the devourer of death, and the one who shines forth the light. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Nicho Nichanam Chetanas Chetananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman Tamatmastam Yenu Pashanti Diraha Tesham Shanti Shashvati Netaresham. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. That one, the eternal among non-eternal things, the intelligence of the most intelligent ones, who, though ever one, nevertheless fulfills the desires of the many. The wise ones realize that one as dwelling in their very self. To them belong peace, and to no one else. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvo Vahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidveshavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman, the reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the Dharma teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. This is the last day of the year of 2017, so it's fitting that we have a final class in the final day of the year on this subject of form and formlessness, which we've been looking at for 3 Sundays now. A month of Sundays is what we're doing on this topic. So we are broadcasting live stream. Welcome live stream audience around the world. I know there are a few of you looking from different countries. And we welcome you into our divine atmosphere here, the atmosphere of Brahman, atmosphere of Ishvara, the chosen ideal, the atmosphere of the Dharma, with all the gods and goddesses looking on from their balcony seat, inside out, looking at us, and maybe hopefully some of our ancestors even tuning in a subtle body, because the whole subject of today is form and formlessness. To make a final conclusion about the topic is pretty much what I put in the introduction when we advertised it on the YouTube and on the schedules, is that very, very few people know what formlessness is, and probably fewer, probably a lot more are not interested. But my contention is that we don't really know what form is either, because we're in the West, we're thinking of form only in the waking state. That is, the atomic particles and how they come together to form objects. We'll look at that chart from atomic to atomic particles later, which is my own offering to the intelligentsia and people who are philosophers of their own kind in different religious traditions and philosophies. But this state of form then is not seen by most of us either. There's a subtle form that we're not accounting for, which is called dream state generally, but more specifically would be your subtle body, and where these same gods and goddesses and ancestors and everything aforementioned reside right now in subtle bodies. That's the only way they can take on a physical body again, if they keep a subtle body, because if they go beyond the subtle body at the time of their passing from the body, then some of them will merge, Shankar says, like a hailstone in an ocean, and won't take form again. Those beings have seen all there is to see here in life and mind, and their desires have been satisfied, their questions have been answered, and they have Vedanta Siddhanta. They realize that all this is Brahman, no matter whether it's outside, inside, or beyond. So form really has, at least, if you're talking about form as nature, it has a manifested side and an unmanifested side. If you're talking from Vedanta rather than from Gita, then it really has three sections: form, subtle form, and causal form. Causal form is the seed state of things. Om is the greatest of all seeds. You can probably put it very simply in that way. In the beginning was the Word. And out of that, or held within that, we might say, in the Word is everything that is in God. It was with God, and it is God. It corresponds nicely in Kundalini Yoga with this Agya Chakra, that is third eye, they sometimes call it, or Jnana Chakshu, Krishna called it. So there's two petals there, they say. Symbolically, that means, I think, best described, souls coming out or down would be, out is better, and taking form. In order, seeing the seeds that are possible, taking up the seeds they decide upon, dreaming about them, that is, cogitating on them, and then fashioning their physical bodies after they choose parents. Then when they go reverse and they are able to, if they don't get bogged down in the lower three chakras that Sri Ramakrishna called eating, drinking, and sensual life, then they can return to the third eye and go back in the other lotus, the other petal of that lotus, you see. So outward ingoing, a very high state to reach. So the point being, taking on form happens here with the Word, and then here with the lovers of God, and then here with the kingdoms of war. That's the way I like to put it. The three, we say peace, 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 shanti, shanti, shanti. Why don't we include all the other four worlds? Because there are 7 of them, right? Ur, Bhuva, Swaha. We know that from the Gayatri mantra. And then you have Janaha, Tapar Loka, and Brahma Loka, Satya Loka. So those are 4 other worlds that you might say all of these would correspond with the 7 chakras. But these 3 lower worlds, we're saying peace, peace, peace to them. Why is that? Because once you reach here, it is all peace already. You don't need to go to war anymore. You need to war with your ancestors because you're beyond your ancestors. You don't need to come back and take up karmas that will cause you to war because you're beyond your karmas. Because in order to get through the Vishnu Granthi, which we'll show you in a minute, you have to penetrate through the 3rd chakra to the 4th. And this basically waking, dreaming, and deep sleep extends over all of these lower 6 chakras. Chit Shakti, pervasive pranic fields, is a nice term for it. Half English and half Sanskrit. Chit Shakti, where she sports. And that would have to be basically from the 5th chakra down. So beings who have reached beyond the need for peace, 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 they've reached the heart chakra, they're now lovers of divine reality. And they will soon become knowers of divine reality, where wisdom and devotion, or knowledge and love, fuse together perfectly, as like the 2 wings of a bird, my teacher used to say. So again, starting off with a little preamble about form and formlessness, my conclusion is that most beings don't know about formlessness here, this side of the curtain of nations, this side of the fourth chakra in the three lower chakras. And then, well, then we know about form, right? Well, if we know about form, then why haven't we seen through it? Why are we still suffering it? Why are we still attached to it? Why are we still desiring it? And why is it still bringing us back in rounds of birth and death into form? And we never know where we went, where we came from when we came back, and how to get beyond both. So, a further explanation of my first class 4 weeks ago when I was saying this same thing, my conclusion about form and formlessness, and why I bring it up as a heading or title of a topic, is that there's very little we know about ourselves. We're even attributing the realms of form to God, but God has nothing to do with the realms of form, so there's our first mistake. God is formless with a capital F, formless only, and it never takes form. Why would it? Where all the problems are in form. Does God have problems then? Are you saying that? Is God born? Does God die? God we call Brahman in our tradition and other traditions, Allah and so forth. Even Jesus saying, Almighty Father, he of course was one with the Father, so he knew it was beyond origins. The Word was an origin, but he knew it was beyond the Word. Wouldn't have wanted his religion based on origins. And so this has been explained for a long time, from time out of mind in India. So we have to begin to ponder these things, because always my point when I bring these up is, if you know something, number one, you lose your fear of it. And when you lose your fear of it, you are the knower. A thing doesn't exist until you think about it. There might be many things you can't conceive of, or think maybe things that are going to come into existence from a place you don't know, like from seated prakriti. But that doesn't mean that you can't be aware of them when they do arise, and that you shouldn't come to know them in full. So when you talk about form and formlessness, you have to say form, 1, 2, 3, and then formlessness, transcendence. And the transcendent part is the bliss. The transcendent part is the eternal peace that passes all understanding. The eternal part is the nondual wisdom. The eternal part is the all-pervasive consciousness that permeates everything, like sweetness inundates sugarcane juice, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say. And so that, everyone's an unknown knower of that. See? We all know that's the essence, but we can't put our finger on it, particularly when we get into this Maya of form. Maya means name, form, time, space, and cause and effect. That's where karma is connected in, where your actions and your thoughts play into time and space after you've taken a name and a form to begin with. So all that's Mayic. And when a person sees through Maya, it's just like splitting a curtain, or the clouds parting and revealing the mountaintop of divine awareness. The all-pervasive air of heights, the spiritual heights like we just chanted. It's the divine atmosphere, so beyond the 5 atmospheres, physical, energy, mind, thought, and individuality, ego, is this divine being that takes those and plays with them. She covers herself with them and laughs. It's like masks, and then tears them off. That's Avarana, Vikshepa, and then Prakasha. She'll cover to hide, and then she'll cover to distort. And those are 2 problems for beings trying to see through Maya's play. Then all of a sudden she'll turn benign and reveal to you Prakasha Shakti. Everyone talks about the covering and distorting power of Maya, but very few talk about the revealing power of Maya. So we have to get a hold of that side of it with our own willpower, after reading the scriptures of a non-dual type and checking them with a guru, preceptor, and then having our own experience. Basically, when Swami wrote us just recently, a couple of days ago, and sent us a meditation article for the next issue of Nectar of Non-Dual Truth, and was saying that old refrain of Advaita Vedanta, Shravana Manana Nidhi Jasana, to hear it, then to think about it, then to realize it. That's not a hard teaching to understand, a little bit harder to follow, but probably very difficult to put it into practice and easier to do so when you know that you're talking about penetrating through these veils, which are of your own making. Maya didn't come here to veil you. It's its nature to veil things. You took it on, accepted the veil, and now you're not tearing it off when you want. Sort of like keeping your overcoat on in a hot room and being uncomfortable. You've been in the frozen wastes, you come in, you leave your coat on, the fire's roaring, people are talking about God, we hope. In fact, divine reality. So you take it off and be comfortable. And so, striking off the veils is like Swami Vivekananda's second verse of his Song of the Sannyasin. Strike off thy fetters, bonds that bind thee down, of shining gold or darker baser ore. Good, good, bad, bad, and all the dual throng. No slave is slave, caressed or whipped, not free. For fetters, though of gold, are not less strong to bind. So people are in these dualities, this throng of dualities, are enjoying and suffering both these pairs of twos that come at you in Maya. I used to say the dualities, dvandva mohena, the diluting dualities, are best dealt with by the threes, the triputis. See? So if you've got problems with pleasure, pain, life, death, bondage, liberation, all that, look at the threes, because there's always a third doorway to get you past the two dualities. Then, on top of that, become aware of the fives, the sets of fives called panchakarna, what caused all of this. You might say that sounds a little bit out of order. You should probably take up the fives first. But the thing is, people can't take up the fives first because they're stuck in the twos, you see. They're not even thinking about the fives. They don't want to look towards origins or where I came from or where nature came from. They're going to believe the evolutionary theory, and that'll be enough for them, you see. And forget about involution, where they're going after death and how they got here in the first place. All of that is only going to be taken up when you transcend the twos with the teachings of threes, and then you consider the fives. It's like getting clarification of mind before you purify. That's the problem. You need to purify first to get clarification of mind, and then you can move on into your inner. Because if you try and intensify, and get clarification before the mind is ready for it, then it's not going to understand. We're giving high philosophical concepts to children who haven't yet purified their minds of attachment to nature. So form and formlessness is one of the most subtle of all dualities, and we've talked about it from the standpoint of the iceberg last week. We had the manifested and unmanifested prakriti, basically when the tip of the iceberg is what we see, taste, touch, hear, and smell. That's all made of earth, air, fire, water, and ether. But underneath the water, the tip of the iceberg, is the bulk. And this is where all these subtle and causal seeds are that are constantly coming up and rising as the sun melts the tip of the iceberg. More is there at the bulk. So as things get dissolved, more is getting revealed, being taken up. And this is the same with your karmas. As you dissolve karmas of this lifetime and fulfill desires, if you're not careful, you're adding to the bulk of your individual karma, your present karma, and then you'll be having to experience that when you give up the one body and take on the next. So you're always playing into this gross and subtle worlds, basically humans and ancestors you're talking about. I mean, humans, animals, insects, unawakened at the very lowest chakra. Ancestors in the lower heavens at the second chakra, and the third chakra, higher heavens. And then a passageway out to lovers, divine lovers of God, reality, Brahman. And many, many secrets untold, many, many mansions of my chambers in my father's mansion, to explore on my way back to formlessness. So this is basically what we've been saying. And today we can look at it in terms of these 5 Russian dolls. I told you the iceberg chart, I got that from Prison Wall and brought it home and put all the assignments to it, if you can think back or look back on that class. Here, hearing about the 5 Russian dolls, also thought that maybe they were Japanese dolls, and they are. But when I looked into their origin, it seems like the Russians were there first with the idea. But using it as a kind of toy, it's just sort of like if you were a digger, archaeologist, and you came across some sort of puzzle, a game they used to play in old times, and you didn't know exactly why they invented that. Sanskrit is sort of that way. Why did Sanskrit have such a light and didn't continue on as a language? It's the old language of the gods, language of ancient times. So you have to take language of Sanskrit and then unwrap it and say, well, what did they really mean by this? Because you find in your culture, thousands of years later, that you don't have something called unmanifested prakriti in your thinking. You don't have rebirth, reincarnation in your thinking. You don't have the idea that the whole universe is an idea in your mind, in your thinking. That everything came from the mind and didn't come from nature, or that nature came from the mind, not the other way around. When people are thinking, the brain gets formed in nature, but we have to turn that on its ear and say, actually, nature gets formed in the brain, in the mind, and then gets manifested by the mind. So you'll be a Sherlock Holmes, and the game's afoot when you start to take on some of these ancient ideologies and this cosmologies like Samkhya and Shaivism and things we've been teaching, and that we're leaving our own traces behind on YouTube now. And let's see how many classes now, 40, 50 more, that you can look into about all sorts of things that were considered mysteries before Sri Ramakrishna was born. But when he was born in 1836, all of a sudden he shed a whole light on not only the world, but on India's lost wisdom too. And the Hindus are fast beginning to wake up to this now. Say, oh, this is what we all were and always will be, you see. And we lost it over this last 2,000 years because of some problems with the Brahmin priest class. So now we're listening to the sannyasins again, and they're beginning to inform us as to the true nature of things, which would include the true nature of nature. Your essence, your svarupa, I call it. So the word svarupa there is very important. There's the Virat Rupa, there's the Vishvarupa, and there's the Svarupa. I'm not going to this chart first, we'll look at it second, but back to the 5 Russian dolls is another way of saying. You can see there some of the beautiful quotes, like this one says, like 5 Russian dolls of diminishing size, neatly nesting inside of one another, all ending up as one all-inclusive unit, similarly do the 5 atmospheres through which name and form manifest all reside within each other. From causeless to causal to subtle to gross, each holding multiple dimensions, countless worlds, and myriad beings. So all of this is a great idea in the mind of God. Or like the Western scientists said recently, now we think that nature looks less like a machine and more like a thought. So when the Westerner starts to wake up to these great puzzles and mysteries with some of these mystery solvers, the philosophical Rubik's Cube, start applying their own willpower to mastering it, then all of a sudden they have ideas like that, insights like that. So all nestled inside of one another. Children, we actually take that out and do this. If I take this apart, I have too few hands. And I'll start fumbling. It'll all fall apart, but you can see basically just the first 3. And then you have to know how to put it back together. Basically, that's how these puzzles get solved, by metaphors, by analogies, and by accoutrement, that you can use to explain this to a young child or a grown-up child. See, adults who still don't know that all the realms of the kingdoms of heaven exist back inside of yourself. The kingdoms of heaven are all within you. I mean, it should be fairly obvious that this is what we're talking about. Because look at some of these designations. The smallest little doll inside is the world, because it's a small thing. The universe is a tiny thing. And it's not really real. So we use the smallest doll for that. You know, you might say, well, if you're going inside, maybe Brahman would be the smallest and most minute, and that would be one way of saying it. But basically, we're talking about Brahman as being all-pervasive and grand and great. And in this analogy, then, we start off with the smallest little doll, which is locked deep inside of here and covered by the sheaths, you could say, 5 sheaths. So from gross to subtle to causal to causeless, you're going as you unwrap that way. So basically, you should be here. But since you're here, we're going to take you this direction. Your true nature is causeless. And basically then the causal comes out of that, then the subtle, and then the ethereal. I'm using the word astral there, not in the sense of astral projection, but in the sense of prana. And then finally the gross. So if the soul is coming outward, it's taking on causal, subtle, and gross. So causal would basically be deep sleep, and gross would be dreaming. Subtle would be dreaming, and waking would be your gross state. You see, if you're awake or waking, you're a realist. If you're in deep sleep, if you're dreaming, then you're an idealist. And if you're in deep sleep, then you're a nihilist. See? So people think that everything's real, so they're in the waking state only. That's how they live, that's where they invest their thoughts, that's where they think about things, if they think deeply at all. Everything is real here. But in dreaming, then they become idealists, and they start to dream about things. See? And then if they go into deep sleep, they're a nihilist, because nothing happens in deep sleep. You don't know even your ego in deep sleep. So you have to go beyond all three. That's called nirvikalpa samadhi. Beyond the waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, beyond the realist, the idealist, and the nihilist is the state of nirvikalpa samadhi. So one will have to adhere to that. Naham, kaham, and saham is how you would say that. Ramana Maharshi practiced kaham, who am I? To get to saham, I am infinite. But had to get out of naham, I'm not any of this. See? So you start out with naham, you should have that in the waking state, or when you're in your so-called realist phase, and then you apply that with, next is kaham, who am I? You question in your dreams. Are these dreams real? Is the word real? Is the world real? And then you say, I am. I see that I exist always, and that I'm the author of all of this. That's saham. That's in your transcendental state. So that's another way of saying formlessness with a small f, and formlessness with a capital F. There's so many ways in which you can put it forth with analogies, with metaphors, with objects, and we'll look at that when we, maybe in a more contemporary vein, in terms of intellectualism and rationale, philosophy, and science, when we look at this chart. But you can see the designations there. At the gross realm, it's a space of objects. The bhutas are there. You see all these various beings that you see here. Humans, the animals, the insects, the plant life, and even unseen microorganisms are all part of the bhuta kasha. And so there's even the unseen here and the seen. See? And there's also the obscene, of course, but we won't get into that. The horrible things that happen to us here on this physical plane. So the path of the ancestors then leads out of the Burloka into this second Russian doll, Pranakasha, and you see there, I put such a list there, from bottom to top: pretas, lost spirits, elementals, those are nature beings, nagas, water gods, ancestors, angels, Gandharvas, those are celestial musicians, siddhas, munis, asuras, manes, demigods, goddesses, gods, and of course Indra, the god of gods. So all of these beings form a sort of inter-pantheon, a sort of tier-to-tier conglomerate that begins to reach towards the path of the luminaries, along the way towards heaven, you see. So you have Bur, Bruvar, and Swar. So Svarloka is the path of the celestials. So you have the path of the ancestors, which most people would revolve here, you see, from human to ancestor. That's called the wheel of birth and death, or it's called the Kala Chakra, the wheel of time. Transmigration from body to body, taking on more births because you haven't connected these worlds together with one another. The A to the U to the M, as we say, in Om fashion, waking again, dreaming to deep sleep, and seeing them all to be not ultimately real, that there's a reality standing behind them. So if you take that trajectory inwards to the third world, you're getting more towards the subtle, you see, and towards close to the causal. Then that's where you see these path of the celestials. They're trying to reach higher and deeper into the realm of the sages and seers who are still their teachers. There's a great Prajapati who comes in human form all the time, who teaches the gods. So Prajapati is an illumined soul who can move amidst all these 5 Russian dolls and keep his awareness of everything. The goddesses are just placed here, and they can't. Gods and goddesses are placed here, and they can't move. So when Prajapati shows up in their thoughts, which is their dreams or in their realms, then he'll teach them. The Dharma teacher shows up, and then I'll go there to that location, which is sort of like, to us would be like dreamlike, but you're actually visiting your ancestors or visiting these beings. It's called darshan, having darshan. So the only way we can explain it is in your dream state, but we don't mean dreams that are figments of our imaginations and dreams that are imbecilic and dreams that are desire, fueled by desire, and so we mean dreams that are visionary. You're taking your consciousness in with you. The people who are going back and forth here are not taking their consciousness very deep. It's these 3 lower chakras we're talking about in Kundalini again. So when they start to ponder deeper things, they become aware of those ideologies and those beings that are there, countless worlds, myriad beings in multiple dimensions. When they become aware of those, then they can actually have darshan, and that brings their consciousness to bear. And then they wake up thinking, I saw my father, my great-grandfather, I saw my guru who's deceased, I saw a great sage or a great seer. Their consciousness has gone with them. So that's the way I like to explain it. You don't take your consciousness very deep in these 2 lower worlds because you don't remember anything when you're born. And as you grow up, unless somebody perks your memory, smriti etu, then basically you grow up with that 2-world, 2-dimensional thinking. And pretty soon the second starts to fall away because you don't believe in heaven anymore. It's easy not to believe in heaven the way it's explained by fundamentalist religion. It's not a place that you necessarily want to go. But if you learn it in the state of how these worlds hold myriad beings, and how all of this is 5 Russian dolls with one reality behind it, then that gives you more interest to explore them. My father's mansion has many chambers. You want to go and explore these and become very versed at them, because then you can move like Prajapati, you can move in and out of them and pick up insights and wisdoms from each chakra from each loka and deposit them again in the lower chakras. And if you talk about Kundalini Yoga, the Kundalini Yoga Upanishad, or the Yoga Kundalini Upanishad says that the awakened soul starts at the lowest chakra, moves inward, moves upward to the highest chakra, gathers nectar there, and takes it back down and distributes it. So it has to go to at least this chakra to find that nectar, and it drips off of a sort of like your uvula, like, drips out saliva and so forth, drips off that. And inside there's a version of that where this nectar is dripping off this inner, higher level of consciousness. And you'll gather the nectar there, and as you come back down the chakras, which means come back into the realm of form, you'll distribute this nectar to people who need it. That's how it's described in one of the ancient Upanishads, one of the 108 Upanishads. So if you're heading up the realm of the celestials, then you've probably got a hold of a great teaching that's galvanizing you and compelling you to reach the realm of the sages and seers. Those beings have seen a guru and have taken them seriously. They've taken an ishtam. And so they know what's up and how it is. And then basically they reach this Maharloka. Janaloka and Maharloka are these realms that aren't at war with each other. You're not at war with anything anymore. So breathe, keep your eyes open and breathe, and stay awake in this. No unconscious bowing, please. It's aggravating and distracting. So basically you get to the space of thought, Chittakasha. Notice the Akasha names, Pranakasha, Bhutakasha, and Chittakasha. So you're talking now about these. Akasha means an inner space. Outer space is all physical. And as we will see from this chart when we get to it, it's made of atomic particles, and you can measure them by microns and nanometers. What happens when you can't measure them anymore? That's where everything ends and you become a nihilist. There's no God. But you didn't know that the particle left the realm of the physical and began to turn into a pranic particle, and that's where your ancestors are. And then when it got beyond the physical, it turned into a mental particle, and it got into the Chittakasha. Mental particle means intelligent particles or thoughts. Those particles are not seen or available to people in this world anymore. It only is accessible by meditation. You have to school yourself in meditation for years to perceive these things and use your various Dharma teachings and the darshanas and the Dharma teachers. Because like I say, when you become aware of them, then it's when you get this impetus and this inspiration to ruthlessly, doggedly go towards highest realization. So Chittakasha is the space of thought, and that's this, you see these Russian dolls, one wrapped inside the other. That is, the physical realms are wrapped inside of prana, and those two, physical and prana, are wrapped inside thought and our mind, and all of that's going to be wrapped inside higher intelligence. So this fourth doll is getting to the deep sleep state where all the seeds are. So you see lots of beings like to hang out, if we could use that expression, at these very high causal levels. Some beings will keep a subtle body to get back to earth. Some people will keep a causal body to do the same thing. So if you have a past master, they're probably keeping causal body in a seed form, in a state of no form, subtle form, if you want to call it that. Causal is a better word. And then they'll project their consciousness from that chakra or from that realm of consciousness back down. Back out is a better way of saying. And they'll take on form, just like this chart will show us. That's why I'm putting these two side by side for the first half. So here you have manus, yogis, arhats, sages, avaduts, mahatmas, paramahamsas, rishis, and seers. This is where you see that Brahman is becoming all pervasive, like sometimes they sing about that, even in the most basic and traditional of traditional hymns. Tum ho eka agochara sabke panapati Prabhu sabke panapati Kisa vidamilu dayamaya Kisa vidamilu dayamaya Tumako me kumati Om Jaya Jagadish Hare Om Jaya Jagadish Hare Prabhu Jaya Jagadish Hare Bhakta Janam Ke Sankata Dasa Janam Ke Sankata Shaname Dure Kare Om Jaya Jagadish Hare. One of some 10 verses here, 9 verses or so, which is a traditional Hindu arati song that you sing while you're waving a lamp. You know, the lamp, all of it's very symbolic. You're on the physical realm. You have fire, which is one of the great tools. You're lighting up everything and you're waving it in front of the deities who are all existing in the different worlds inside of you, myriads of them. And each person there worshipping as their own ideal. And it might be Krishna, or it might be Shiva, or it might be Jesus or Buddha and so forth. And they're all saying Jaya Jagadish Hare, victory to the Lord of the world. So this one verse says very nicely, this 6th verse, all souls are fragments of thee, O Eternal One. Thou art indeed the one without a second. Reveal to us the way to transcend our limitations and wend our way to the highest consciousness, victory to the blessed Lord of the world. So you're wending your way to the highest consciousness, which also exists at the very level that your body is. It's not the body, of course, it's the Atman. So that's why you strike off your fetters and transcend your body attachment. And you begin to detach, and then pretty soon you can attach and detach at will. Remember, we've said that. Attach and detach at will. So then inwards you go on this great trajectory, this sojourn. Remember, you can do this after passing from the body, or you can do it every 24 hours. Conscious time is not really real. So if you have a mind, it's a nice saying, if you have a mind to do so, you can sit and steady yourself and stabilize your consciousness and then explore everything that's within it. It's just that if you fall asleep, or if your breathing's erratic, or if your mind's dull, or you haven't got the gunas under control, or your karmas are coming back on you, or some scars are making you act a certain way, or your ancestors have it out for you. Well, I can go on, you want me to go on with that kind of list, that all of these impediments are the way and your consciousness is not stable, then you cannot see these things. You're distracted. In the time of Sri Ramakrishna, he said, worldliness is the chronic disease of the age. So when he was alive, that's true. Then I met Jamgon Kongtrul Rinpoche in my lifetime, a great Tibetan teacher, and he said, distraction is the great chronic disease of the age. Then I came to the West, you see, and I'm teaching Western people. Here I am in the body. And I can say, just like Sri Ramakrishna and Jamgon Kongtrul said, that the chronic disease of the age today is indeterminacy, is apathy. There's no interest. And when there is interest, they can't make a conclusion. They can't make a conclusion. They're always arguing about things, or reading this and that, or opposing this tradition against one another, not knowing that their consciousness is one, and that everything is a complement to it. Even suffering is a complement to consciousness. When you're in consciousness, not when you're not in it. Suffering is a great insult when you're not in consciousness. But if you can stabilize yourself in your own consciousness and sit at any time, at any moment, even when you sleep, you see, a man has come to me from a land that never sleeps. I learned this mystical way from a great adept. Now I cannot practice meditation at the sacred times of dawn and dusk anymore, because the sun of her wisdom never rises and sets. I used to practice meditation at dawn and dusk. I can't do that anymore, because now the sun of her wisdom, I see, never rises and never sets. He's gone beyond, And his teacher has taught him how to do that by transcending waking and dreaming and deep sleep and being himself again. That's self with a capital S, Atman, Buddha nature. Tathagata Garbha, a great mass of pure conscious awareness which is indivisible, immutable, and beyond all transformations like waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. So you infill your mind with this. You awaken it from the slumber of ages of lifetimes. You see. You ponder it and you come to the conclusion. So indeterminacy and apathy and so forth, throw them out, chase them out the back door, and become fully convinced of this single reality, or maybe we should call it singular, that defies all dualities. And beyond this, I could sing you some slokas from a beautiful stotram that's beyond all of this. Beyond all of this teaching. It's only here. It doesn't go anywhere, and that's all it ever is, and it knows that's the truth. So, my reason for teaching cosmology, as we have to know the kingdoms of heaven within, we have to know the mansions of the Father's, the chambers of the Father's mansion, and we have to know the lokas and the akashas within us, because we travel through them to get to the body and back to formlessness. So if we can take our consciousness with us, then we'll know what's there. Here, maybe this will help you. That will help us wake up and not give rise to a breathless state that doesn't have consciousness with it. You know, can't be falling out. You have to take the seat, hold it, be fully focused, resist all intrusions from Maya, and take that as our ideal and stay that way for the rest of our life. No falling back. So a list of great beings the path of the luminaries has opened to you. See? And this is where you will be having visions of great souls. You might even meet one on earth then, if you have to come back this way. So all of this is leading toward the path of Brahman, or the Trinity. Yes, we like to sing that too, and we do so just to remind us. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshwara, Guru Eva Param Brahman, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, your gurus are here, you see, and then the highest gurus are here. So the Trinity stands right there between them. Out of the great Trinity comes the gurus. There are actually slokas in the songs and scriptures of India that say, if you look at your guru, you're actually seeing the Trinity manifest. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are there in an awakened soul. And that, so you can see how that transcends even the earth plane, because great souls who are realized have come to the Burloka, to this gross akasha, and are appearing in people's waking states, and eventually in people's dreaming states. And one person wrote me a few weeks back, said, "You've been feeding me in my dream state. You come to me in my dream state and you feed me, you give me food. Thank you so much." See? So you can penetrate these barriers, and you can reach these great souls who are all manifestation of the one reality. That's where you're seeing the highest manifestation of God, when you see Vairajas, Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, Avatar, Ishvara, Sadashiva, other great names for these souls that you could say bye-bye to form. It's the last vestige of form you will see when you see, that is, perceive inside, without one eye instead of with two. Of course, you'll never see them with deluded eyes. You have to have love eyes, Sri Ramakrishna said. Well, that's the last sign of form you'll see. So that has to be the very highest reaches of the causal, You see, you probably talk about this sixth chakra there, the single eye. And so what you would see there would be very, very vacant, bliss-filled lands, a kind of emptiness that's empty of all things that are conceptual, and just the one reality as light pervading there. And then you have to make acquaintance with Brahman and Shakti, who are one like fire in its power to burn. And there you see that last doll, which holds all the rest, causeless. So you see causal, subtle, astral and gross, or ethereal and gross. But beyond all of that is the causeless cause. And they ask you to meditate on that. Adihi sa samyoga namittahetu parastrikala kalapi dristaha tam vishvarupam bhava bhuta midyam devam svatutastam upasya purvam. Meditate upon the Lord as thine own self seated in your heart. Now, as if they're saying, there, in the heart, where all the subtle nerve endings meet, abides the Atman. So we need to find it there, the one abiding reality. All abiding. Atman is all abiding, is a Vedantic, famous Vedantic phrase this age, this time. So I am Atman, all abiding. So you become very sure and certain of that, with no doubts left over. And as a result of that, then you see the primordial cause of the relationship between matter and spirit. And when you see that cause, you can put that cause to sleep. See? You can end it and go beyond the relationship between matter and spirit. That's called kaivalya in yoga. It's your ability to not take a form again, to reach ultimate liberation. And then, if you're free, you could come down again into the realms of name and form like these beings did, and see it all as one, all the way down to the grossest atom of earth. You'll see it. That same Brahman pervading everything. There never was two or many. There was just only this indivisible unity, this homogeneity of everything. And the vehicles might have been on different levels, but the quality and quantity that was in the Atman in each one of them was the same. Samadarshitvam. That's why the great seer can save the fallen and the lowly, or the benign soul can help the suffering and fallen. In that case, then, those beings are masters and past masters. So these final quotes down here will give us some more keys into this chart, and we'll move on. Lord Vashishta says, all forms, multifarious in manifestation and expression, being aspects of the wisdom word, like drops of rain falling into torrential rivers, like that, enter the infinite ocean of consciousness called Brahman. Each akasha, physical, pranic, mental, intellectual, and causal, dissolve into the Paramakasha, the supreme space of pure conscious awareness. So, Lord Vashishta teaching the avatar, Sri Ram, he was just a teenager in the Treta Yuga, thousands of years ago. So we shouldn't be probably too proud of our scientific knowledge. Science is busy placing scientists are busy placing science at the highest pedestal, but it still knows nothing about the ancestors, the gods, the goddesses, the deities, the Trinity, and ultimate reality. So, very one-sided, and bereft of the whole ideology of involution, believing that somehow a soul got created, but a soul never gets created. That's religion. In science, then, probably there is no soul. There's just a brain, a body-mind mechanism, and intelligence comes to it according to its experiences. That's just Chaitanya Vritti. It's not even based in non-duality yet. It's all vibration of mind. And one other quote there, which we don't want to skip, is there in the middle on that trajectory. It has to do with Chitakasha. I forgot to mention you had Bhutakasha, space of objects, Pranakasha, space of energy, Chitakasha, space of thought, Jnana-kasha, space of intelligence. You can see the beings that are associated with each of those spaces inside. And then Chitakasha, Paramakasha. Well, that's what Vasishtha is just talking about here. All of them fit from the physical to the pranic to the mental to the intellectual and the causal. They all dissolve into the Paramakasha, Supreme Akasha. That was one of Sri Ramakrishna's favorite teachings too. I love the idea of the Paramakasha, this ultimate space into which everything dissolves. A spaceless space, if you will. Now on the way there, Vasishtha also says this: like Akasha, space that holds many objects yet is not affected by them, so too does Brahman both hold and pervade the many worlds and various forms held in space and time, though it is beyond space and time. So the great teachings of Lord Vasishtha, way, way back, he's one of those souls that has mastered this process and will show up at the behest of his father, Lord Brahma, because he's one of the mind-born sons of Lord Brahma, one of the great Manus. See? At that level, here, will come and teach, even teach the avatar, if the avatar needs that teaching down on earth. Because here on earth everything is very, very thick and dense. So a quick look and another run through, we probably do it twice a year, or at least once a year, look at the 5 Russian dolls, because it's so self-explanatory as to the idea that is rather undigested as yet, that their Father's mansion has many chambers, or that there are kingdoms of heaven within us. And if we're still looking outside for them, then we've gone the wrong direction. I used to say, up there, you don't even have all 5 elements yet, see, that we know of. And here at least you can breathe and drink. So land, water, and ether are not enough to survive. You need water and air. So here we make a transition then in a very connected way, a conjunction, if you will, of Yahriti in Sanskrit, over to this chart on atomic to atomic particles. If you're going outside in, but it's from atomic back to atomic particles if you're coming from inside out. Now you see there the meditator who is just dissolving, basically. All these particles are of different kinds are just diffusing, you see, and everything that's with form has gone away, and you just feel like light alone. Light, leaping through the nerves, as Sri Aurobindo said in his great poem Savitri, which is a huge epic poem he wrote about this consciousness and its play and its ultimate station beyond all appearances. So we borrow here from the Mundaka Upanishad, which I can do it by memory if you like, because it's such a powerful chant. Agnir Murta Chakshusi Chandrasurya Vishaha Shotrivag Vivitasha Veda Vayu Prana Hridaya Vishvamasha Padbayam Prativihi Sarvabhutan Taratman. So basically, feet, Padmam, and Prithivi, earth and water and air, represents all the 5 elements, are all there at his lower organs. See, at his feet. The earth is at his feet, it means. Sarva Bhutan Taratma, but the Atman permeates all, Sarva, permeates everything. Everything that's in appearance, in its doll form that's so adorable to everyone, is really permeated and saturated with this formless reality. Otherwise, this could not exist. This is a mere phantom. And some souls have gone that direction with it, toward the abhava state, beyond bhavas, beyond blisses and experiences, even as high as they may be, and just seeing it all as just everything dissolving, and including when the mind starts to dissolve, what will happen to its concept of time and space that's in the mind. That too will dissolve. So you have to get into a high state of pure mind, Buddha mind, empty mind, however you want to put that, and see all the forms dissolve so you know that you're formless. They'll come dancing back when you take on the ego again, but they can go away when you transcend the ego. Individual mind-ego complex, I call it. But you have to use your intelligence to hone it and see through that. So I just chanted this Sanskrit to this. And the English is verily that one indivisible consciousness is the indwelling essence in all beings. Fire is its head, the sun and moon its two eyes. The unstruck sound Om, its ears. The revelation of Scripture is its cosmic mind, the many-tiered universe of name and form from gross to subtle its heart, and its arms and legs are the four directions, east, west, south, north, so forth. Truth is its voice, the wind is its breath, and from its feet the verdant earth has originated. So that's a beautiful quote from the seers, the rishis. See, the rishis here, out of the Mundaka Upanishad, that you can buy for $2 if you want and read it from Ramakrishna order. Mundaka Upanishad, one of the beautiful 10 or so that Shankara commented on, made it authentic. You can see here, then, if we start from the bottom of this chart, because it's one of those, we're here in the realm of atomic particles and protons and neutrons and subatomic particles and quarks and so forth, have all been given a name at this different level inside of the atom. You know how much power is in an atom, so it's a matter of respect and carefulness, not power that we should be seeking from it, but it should be a sign to us. We don't want to explode the atom and use it for vicious acts around the Burloka and cause it harm. We want to see what's in it and then contemplate it, because you're going to have to split a different kind of atom in your mind, these other atoms that we'll talk about. But let's look at it, because I put this together specifically for the intelligentsia, so that there might become some understanding between scientists and religionists. There might become some understanding between materialists and cosmologists, and between philosophers and worldly people. That they all have their ideologies. There's a lot of wisdom in the Burloka that the materialist, that the scientist, intellectual has as their own possession. Like I just said, might be careful how you use that, so if you don't want to cause violence. But you want to become aware that there are other levels of consciousness, and that when the physical particle disappears, it doesn't mean that that's all that exists, that there are other levels of your consciousness. If you knew that the realm of insects, animals, 5 elements, microorganisms, humans were all inside of the other Akasha, then you would have a place to go with it. But you haven't been given this teaching, Dharma teaching, which is centuries old, millennia old, by your superiors or by your parents, by your grandparents, so you don't go anywhere with that knowledge. And that's what Krishna calls dangerous knowledge. If you have knowledge of just one world alone, then it begins to settle and steep, you see, and coagulate and so forth, and it can cause problems. It's dangerous knowledge, because the ego has a hold of it. The ego dies about here at the heart chakra, and until then it's in charge of everything. Even in the realm of the ancestors, the ego's in charge. That's why people are being reborn with egos all the time. Huge pods of egos, called races and so forth. So if we look at this from the ground up, it's just a quick study basically. There are classic physics and there's also quantum physics. We know that from our recent history in the West. You can see there, it's all has to do with measurement of microns or nanometers. That's the physical increment that they've been able to determine. They finally found things so minute that they had to invent a new way of measuring, and that's called nanometers. So before that it was all microns, like human hair was 50 microns. Smallest particle viewable by the naked eye is 1 micron. You have to have really good eyes to see that. Then red blood cell is 500 nanometers, a billionth of a meter. So you can see how tiny that is. So classic physics then deals in lengths that are greater than 100 nanometers. When they began to acquire the ability to search deeper, they saw that a DNA molecule was only 2.5 nanometers, that a glucose particle was 1 nanometer. It reminds me of Sri Ramakrishna saying a small germ can kill an elephant. So if you're not aware of your glucose particles and you're diabetic, that can kill you. A little tiny thing. So a glucose particle is 1 nanometer in length, in size. And then the hydrogen atom, 1/10 of a nanometer. So that gets to be very, very small and tiny. And how we ever develop, number one, the ability to see it. But the better question is the desire to want to see it and split it to release a great power, you see. I am death personified, one of the scientists said, quoting from the Gita when they exploded that first atom bomb. Quoted Krishna, one of them, I am death personified, you see. So they were looking in terms of physical power. But Krishna must have stood back and laughed and said, that's nothing. You don't know the power that caused one atom to be explosive. It's called my divine mother. It's called Shakti. You don't know what powers are in her and how subtle and sweet and beautiful and nonviolent they are. And so this is what should be guiding you inwards on this spiritual journey, even when you're sitting here in the human body, and probably especially if you are in a world that's benighted. You should be taking this inner journey every day in your meditation and opening up trails inside of you, nadis, nerves, with this machete of Dharma that you've been given, and cutting your way into your true nature. Seeing it, it would seem like the first time, but you've probably seen it before you were born in the Bur Akasha or Bhutakasha. So with that introduction then, you can see how a glucose particle is pretty much atomic particles, subatomic particles, become the disappearance of space. That is, they can't determine them. They're too small, and they're changing at a billionth of a second. So a scientist looking at them would draw a different conclusion from another scientist looking at them as to what their size is and what their nature is. They basically pretty much epitomize Maya when you see subatomic particles changing at a billionth of a second. It's like they've defied time and space, but your mind is still in time and space. So you're looking at them and trying to give them a measurement and a life. But how long a life can a billionth of a second be? You have to go to the atomic particle and say, get a life. See? So they conclude, disappearance of physical space, there's just a void after that. It's nothing but a void. There's nothingness, because there's no soul. Even the consciousness that's seeing that there's a void is not making the right conclusion. It should say, if there's a void and I'm seeing it, then I'm the seer. And then that should take me further to go beyond the appearance of the disappearance of form. See, that would be the rational thing to do if you were a scientist who is pursuing the truth, past physics, because this is physics we're talking about. What about metaphysics? Well, that would probably come next, and yes, there are some very silly things in metaphysics that people have gotten into, and so it would put off the rational scientists, and it puts off those who are truly spiritual too, to think that you would get trapped playing with tarot cards or waving peacock feathers or superimposing some sort of imagined power into a crystal, or things like that they get dabbling with, you see. When the real secret is revealed here by Mother India right before you, and that is basically that there's a next particle to look at. And this is where the believers in deities and the believers in matter can actually make a connection. Because one's saying there are gods and goddesses and deities inside of you, and there's kings of heaven inside you and all that, and the rest is saying, no, there's only this one physical space. But if you showed them how one particle could dissolve and a new kind of particle be taken up that cannot be seen with the eyes, heard with the ears, tasted with the tongues, smelled with the nose, or felt with the hands or feet, then you might have a bridge or an avenue, a nadi, a connection to make for those people to start considering where they've come from and where they've gone, where their loved ones have come from and where they go. Because the scientist is going to be very hard put when his beloved wife dies, or his son passes away, or his father passes away. And no explanation for that, no matter how scientific you are. Because, in fact, there's nothing. They've come from nothing, they've gone to nothing. There was no soul. And when their consciousness was here, it was a product of nature. How can nature, which is sentient, create intelligence? These are beings that thought they came from apes, but they came from God, Brahman. The apes came from the mind of the person who came from God, you see. All of this is mental projection. So, 4,320,000,000 year evolutionary cycle, and then, caused from some big bang from one sun or something, all of a sudden that ends. Everything goes further out into space and diffuses. Yes, it diffuses, but it diffuses back into light. It's like the sound of a bell. You could hear the sound of the bell and say, oh, it diffused in the air, and you'd be a materialist. But if you heard the sound of the bell and said, there's another ring in there, potential, you see, then you'd say the bell went back, the ring went back into the potential of the bell to cause the ring. And that's what the word is like. Things are coming in and out of the word all the time, just like in and out of a bell. Ramakrishna's favorite analogy for the word was a big bell. Tom, he said, T-O-M, the strike, the sound, and its diffusion, sort of like Om. So he said, but it doesn't diffuse to nothingness. It goes back into the potential of the bell to strike again. So waking, dreaming, and deep sleep and consciousness is all in potential and seeds. And notice the chart. If you're here, you're in the waking state. The minute you enter into the subtle particle, you're in the dreaming state. And when you enter into the causal particle, it's deep sleep. So back to the prana matra, because matra is a word for a particle in Sanskrit. In that millions of year old language, or eternal language, Bharat, that is, the eternal land had this eternal language, which is called Devabhasya, means language of the gods, language of the seers, language that came from this level. And just because it's not being spoken nowadays on earth is no reason that it doesn't exist. We know that it has the best way of explaining spiritual terms, what's going on. And that it doesn't exist here is probably a great shame that we've forgotten it, a great injustice that we've done, Mother India, who has ways of explaining these processes to us, as you can see, all coming from the Dharma, from Swarupa, from your essence. So there you see, and in much like this, you see the Pranamatra is where the scientist would know where his ancestors went, where the celestials are, and where the elementals. So they're busy arguing. I saw an angel in my dreams. No, you didn't. Those don't exist. See, so impasse. So if you come to know that there's a particle beyond the physical particle called pranamatra, a particle of energy, not kinetic and not physical vibration, but mental vibration. It's like akin to your thoughts. then you could maybe say, well, maybe you did see an angel. So does that mean angels in heaven and all that are real? Oh, Advaita says, we're not really going that far yet. Let's take you another step in. And so when they go a step in, you'll see that there's a chit matra, a particle of your mind, or a particle of your thought. And that's if you want to hook it up with the gods, goddesses, and munis and siddhas, you see, which is here. Now you see that the whole world is an ideation in the mind of God. You're beginning to get that idea, because everyone talks about the mind of God. But if you're a physicist and the mind of God either doesn't exist or it only created physical things, and it exists up in heaven somewhere, whatever the case may be, then of course you're not going to get the rational truth of the matter. You're not going to have any insight that's real or any true vision. So you need to go a step further. There's particles of thought, and we know how it's ironic that the scientists whose minds are pretty much limited to here can actually have higher thoughts. They're just not aware that they're coming from Chit Shakti, from Divine Mother Wisdom, from a subtler place. They're thinking that they belong to the ego. I mean, you hear it all the time, right? Well, let's see, I found this great constellation out there. I was the first one to see it with my microscope, my telescope. Now I'm going to give it a name, probably my own. I'll be known for that. See? So it's the same way inward. If you get some great insight from inward, then you're going to pull it out of nothingness and not give the credit to where it came from. It came from your ancestors, or it came from the sages, or it came from the great rishis, or it came from the Trinity through the vehicle of Mother's prana. That's why pranakasha is very important, and why breathing exercise, and why exercise and blessing your food and purifying your prana is so important. We've talked about that many, many classes with me sitting in this very spot. And over the years in other spots, that's why that's so important, to get your prana under your, not only your control, but in your awareness. Because you'll make the bridge from physics into metaphysics. And when you do, then all of a sudden you are in the realms of the King of Heaven. You've gone into the mind. The kings of heaven aren't somewhere that you go after you die. They're not a location in space and time. They're in your mind, and you've entered now mind proper. And so you're not looking out anymore and saying, I wonder who's up there, because there's no one up there. That's a fabrication of the human mind out there that came from God's mind. Now you're looking inward to your own projecting power, and you're seeing, I have my name on everything in there. My ego has its name on everything there. That's mine, that's mine, that's mine. If I can see it, think about it, it's mine. I, me, mine. You never say thou, thee, thine. You never hear it said in intellectual circles, oh, that wisdom belongs to Divine Mother. Oh, thou. It's thine. It's Shakale Tomari Icha, a beautiful song in India. It says basically, O Mother, all happens by thy own sweet will. All work belongs to you, all thought belongs to you, others call it their own. So when the ego gets out of the way or becomes refined or ripened, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, then you can assign those things to their right locations and hands off of possession, called non-agency. I'm not the agent of this anymore, and I'm not the owner of it. And there you have a saint and a seer and egoless person whose only purpose for getting into the body in the process is to help others out of it. Krishna says that in the Gita. Loka sangraha. I have nothing more to desire in these realms. Why? Because he knows them all to be empty, made of particles. And so I don't have anything to gain here anymore. I don't possess anything. I'm not the agent. I just come here for the highest good of all beings. Loka sangraha. Lokas. See that? Bhuta, kasha, kasha. It's the same word for loka. pranakasha. So now we go to particles of intelligence next. There's even a sweeter, more integral and more inward particle that's getting very close to Brahman. It's the light that shines off the word, is how we've sometimes put that. And that means pretty much chit matra, particles of thought, turn into jnana matra, particles of intelligence. I put out a book called Jnana Matra just a couple years ago. And anthropomorphically speaking, that's where you'll find the seers, the rishis, the paramahamsas, the mahatmas. That's where they're keeping their causal bodies. If you keep a gross body or an astral body, then more likely you're going to return to earth and be caught in that loop. As Krishna says, revolve only, never rise. But if you keep a causal body, you can either go towards Brahman through that third eye channel, or you can go back to the worlds. It's your choice. You can be a videha mukti or a jivan mukti. Jivan mukti means jiva, I'll take on jivahood again, but I'll be free. Videha mukti means no more bodies for me, thank you very much, I'm gone and I'm gone forever. That's how Lord Buddha put it. Have no hope for me, for the three worlds, forevermore, I'm gone and gone forever. So, dissolve, dissolution. And this is how dissolution happens in meditation, if you want to look at it under the auspice of what everyone's talking about nowadays in worldly circles, intellectual circles, particles, particle theories, string theories, DNA. Those are all products of something else. And the something else is fast becoming emptied of form as you gaze upon it, just like the subatomic particle lost its form when you gazed upon it. What's here also applies there, you see. What is here is there, what is there is here. Who said that? A rishi of the Katha Upanishad, about 12 times in a row in his slokas. And this is that, and this is that, and this is that. What is here is there, what is there is here, what is here is there, what is there is here. How come they said it so many times at the end of their teachings? Well, dissolution of all particles happens next. That's an inexplicable and unthinkable experience that happens. You know, it's not just insight which you would be getting along the way, but it's direct experience of ultimate reality. We're very close to it. You can see that's where the avatars, the Videha Muktis, and the Nityasiddhas, the eternally perfect souls, are on that fence. See, on the fence between this chakra and this chakra and this chakra and this chakra. You remember Sri Ramakrishna used to say, in my highest samadhi I was running a boat race between these three chakras. So he saw boat races in India along the Hooghly River and so forth, and so he'd see people winning and people falling behind. He said, well, these rivers, you're having boat races on physical rivers, but there's these nadis inside. And they're rivers too, of consciousness. And I get on them and I run a boat race up and down them. I come down here, I can speak to you about it. And if I go up here, I can't speak anymore. And if I go up here, I can't even say I anymore. The speaking, the one who's speaking, and what's spoken disappears. So this is what we're trying to say, as far as words can tell, about Laya Matra. It's also the word, Om. It's the dissolution of all particles. You could say the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the last vestige of form, will hold a very, very causal body there. And they too at some point will turn and disappear into homogeneous awareness. And that's Brahman. Notice that that's where waking, dreaming, and deep sleep disappear into Turiya. Jagrat, Shishupti, and Swapna and Shishupti, basically waking, dreaming, deep sleep, turn into Turiya, the fourth. And they didn't want to aggrandize it, and they didn't want to try and speak about it, they just wanted to experience it. So they didn't give it a grand name, like Akanda Satchidananda or something. Turiya. Advaita said, the fourth. And then somebody came along with Turyatita. There's a fourth, there's a beyond the Turyatita. So they're always talking about deeper and deeper levels of consciousness. Even after particles disappear, what is that light of awareness? Well, we'll look at it in terms of how the practitioner does it with the dissolution of the mind stream after our break. Here we should pause for 10 or 15 minutes, have some prasad food, sanctified food and sanctified water, and return in 15 minutes. Thank you for your kind attentions on this first half of our last class of this series on form and formlessness. Here on the last day of 2017, which is also the last class of our fourfold series on form and formlessness, we will end the second half of the last class with the completion of the from atomic to atmic particles. Nice little phrase I thought of when I thought of this whole chart, put it together for Western intellectuals and scientists and people who believe in deities or trying to see the connection between the various and variegated ways in which people think of life here. And if they do think past life here, the hereafter, and also the heretofore, you might say, what came before us, not just on the physical level, like evolutionary theory through all the different kinds of celled organisms, but this whole spiritual evolution, you might say, that points more toward the chambers of my Father's mansion back inside of us, which would then sort of outstrip, philosophy would then outstrip physics. There's a higher P here in charge, and we'd want to go to it to see how beings who are called enlightened and who have influenced millions of beings and who have themselves gained experience of this and gotten their enlightenment think about inner worlds and the real powers of the mind, not just the outer powers of the brain. So we've been looking at that from particles, and we want to finish up this chart in the part of this first half and look at one more I have. We don't probably have time for all of them that I have ready to show you, but we did reach such a refined level of particle that the particles disappeared on us, and that's called Brahman, or here you could see Swarupa, formless essence, or absolute reality, if you want to put it in English. To quote Sri Ramakrishna down here, who had the experience of this highest reality, like a lump of sugar dissolving into a cup of tea, the entire world of name and form and all objects merge into Brahman, the ultimate reality, at the end of a cosmic cycle. All manifested things are soluble into the supremely unmanifested Brahman. So out of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, we find that beautiful statement of his, as if each of these worlds could be called lumps of sugar, so that you would dissolve one back into the other, like you would hide little Russian dolls back inside the bigger Russian dolls. In this case, understand that these particles get more and more refined. There's a one sugar cube dissolves into two, be called then duality, and then it dissolves into particles, and that's atomic theory. And then it disappears. When it disappears, it's not gone as far as a void anymore, it's just empty. So the difference between being non-existent and empty, the teaching of emptiness, shunyata in Buddhism, and also other schools, means empty of objects, not empty of substance. So you have to understand those words correctly, philosophically speaking, to not make the mistake of becoming a nihilist after you became an idealist, and before that you were a realist, as Ramakrishna again said. But you became a knower of Turiya, the highest reality. And so all across the top here, different names or different stations, statements for that divine reality, which he describes nicely after the sugar cube has dissolved into one beautiful sweet cup of delicious Ceylon tea, or Darjeeling tea. And so I wanted to take you back down into form now. We've had this experience particle-wise of losing our form and becoming this meditator in here, you see, who went from manifested state, God as the manifest universe, into God as the cosmic person, Virat Rupa, Vishvarupa, and then finally to formless essence of Brahman. That's a very simple way of putting it in a triputi, one of those threes by which pondering you can get rid of the problem of the twos. So Virat Rupa, God is the manifest universe, and then Vishvarupa, God is the cosmic person, like Vishnu and so forth, the Trinity. And then finally formless essence, disappeared into a formless essence. We were talking about that when Sri Ramakrishna stated one of his favorite teachings, is that when I see here now, when I come to this realm, that God has become everything. Well, God can't become, so it's not an Advaitic point of view, but it's his favorite point of view from which he can teach how Brahman is in everything, but not a thing. So he says, I see here all of this, Brahman has become all this. Consciousness has, as it were, manufactured this or projected it. And whether it's an illusion or it's real as long as you see it and gone when you don't see it, or all these 30 or 40 different schools of philosophy that talk about that, is really sort of by the side of the road. You see, it's beside the point-ism. Basic idea is to know that consciousness is the foundation, and that everything, like a many-tiered castle, however way you put that, in terms of the iceberg or the sound of the bell or the 5 Russian dolls, or this preparation here, leads you to this understanding of a formless essence behind. And that's what you feel. We were talking about at the break, while the live stream audience was not with us, talking about the feeling that a musician gets when composes a piece of music, the feeling the artist gets when he paints a canvas, the feeling the sculptor has when they sculpt a statue, the feeling the scientists had when they're concentrating at their best in a sattvic state of mind. That feeling is that consciousness that's looking on. But if you don't have a name for it and a designation and a place where it came from and a place to put it, somewhere to hang your hat or some place to lay your head philosophically, then it escapes you, because even the yogis say that it's most difficult of detection. It's like oil and sesame seeds, the Svetasvatara Upanishad says, you see, or patina in copper, nice copper penny, you never know that green stuff's in there till you leave it in the shower accidentally for a week or two. So it's the hidden, and you have to look for it as if it's the hidden. Well, science went that far in physics to find the hidden. That was all particles. But now we're saying that there are other particles that are subtler and subtler, finally causal. You can call these particles seeds if you want. And they go deeper into your own consciousness. That's why you put waking, dreaming, and deep sleep side by side with them. The 3 worlds, the 3 bodies, and 3 states of consciousness. All these triputis that can give you some place to hang your hat, philosophically speaking. So if you were to come back down into form, let's say you realized this particle string theory that I'm proposing here, and you saw yourself as consciousness graduated, step by step, and you were with the particle until it finally dissolved, and then you were your own self again. And then you decided somewhere in there, Brahman brooded, the Upanishad says, and it wanted to experience form again, for whatever reason. And Mother Shakti said, "Are you sure you want to do that, Father?" You see, but oh, don't worry, I'm not doing anything, he says. So basically then it all comes forward. So you would come down from absolute reality and take it on this way. This is a little bit more comprehensible for the materialist, for the physicist, for the scientist, for the practical person, puts it into terms that you might be able to accept easier than the idea of there might be some other worlds inside of you that exist of finer particles. I don't think that's a very hard jump to make myself, but then this is the way I've been trained and had my own experiences in this kind of subtle refinement process in meditation for 40 or 50 years in this lifetime alone. So you become acclimatized to the ideas, like I said, and the mind thinks that way, and then it takes them on, and pretty soon you're looking at the whole universe as a thought rather than an object. It's just a transition that you'll make when you get rid of the conditionings of your mind. You could study the Nidanas of Buddhism or the Praticca Samutpata and some of the teachings of Advaita Vedanta and the 3 states of awareness, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, to get more grounded in this. So coming down here, you are absence of particles. There is no form. And that's inexplicable, indescribable. And there's no separate being to describe. Like Ramakrishna said, he was a salt doll, and it was probably a salt doll about here. See, and then he went into the ocean to measure its depths, and he found out that he didn't exist anymore as a he, or as an independent or individual being, that he was the ocean. The salt doll was made of salt, in other words, so it liquefied there, and there was no way it could describe what the ocean was or how deep it was. It was its original intention. I'll be the first person to come back and tell everyone what Brahman is. No way. So this is how he explains his own experience of nirvikalpa samadhi, getting into it. So now decides he will come back and try to explain it to a bunch of other salt dolls, or maybe some stone dolls called scientists who won't budge their position. So he comes down. Down means out, from inside. And don't get me wrong, we say up and down, that's not a good way to think of things, because there's nothing up there but more of what's here, probably less, as I was saying, of what's here. So you're talking about inward and outward. It's inner life that Jesus told the fishermen they needed to get in order to understand eternal life. So eternal life is this inward verity, which we've described very well in these ways of philosophical saying by Mother India's darshanas. Now you're coming down, so from particles you would reverse this process, right? So you have to start to take on particles, so that's called a causal body. This side we're putting it in terms of bodies, this side is in terms of particles. So you come back down, particles of formless intelligence which are held in abeyance in potential. This is all borrowing Vedantic Sanskrit and putting it into the best English we possibly can. Held in abeyance means it's floating in the cosmic mother's womb, as it were. It has this potential. It's, in other words, seeds is the best way. And that's why there's so many seeds here in this world. Embryo seeds, forests of seeds, fruits with seeds, watermelons with seeds. Seeds are everywhere. But you're not looking at the seed as an example of this level of consciousness where you're taking on particles. And you're not seeing the river as it really is, the seed as it really is, people as who they really are. And none of this is open to your five senses. That's why Gita and Ramakrishna and so forth are talking about getting love senses. Get yourself infused with some divine consciousness, then you start to see the underlying reality, even here. Because what's here is also there, and what's there is also here. So you have to strip the veils away here more than you have to do in these inner levels. The problem with heaven is that there's pleasure there, more pleasure than here. So it's very hard to transcend heaven, so you come back to earth to work out your karmas after your pleasures are, your good merits are worked out. That's a great Vedantic teaching. They've seen the heavens, and they're not that big on them, because there are beings beyond the heavens that are realized, and they're courting formlessness, not form. So you see the Vedic, yogic, and Buddhistic and schools and so forth, they really have this whole wide open nadi, this great river, this great tributary cruising into Brahman. It's called Kaivalya Pragbara. And from the other direction is called Samsara Pragbara. So there's a whole river of souls floating out of these heavens into earth. And there's a river of freedom going out the other side, that is, the other side, towards the ocean of awareness. It's the Jnana ocean, ocean of sorrowless light, the ocean of Akasha, wisdom, inward. So you find yourself as particles of formless intelligence held in abeyance and potential. These are these seeds or these particles there. Come down a step, you decide, I'm going to take on a grosser body. I'll call it a subtle body here. And this is your consciousness individualizing itself. You see, like if you were a hailstone that fell into an ocean, and then you're now being rained out of the sky of awareness, and you're taking on a form of a hailstone again. So now you're solidifying your consciousness down into bodies that are of seed form, then of subtle form, heavenly form, finally of gross form. Your consciousness never changes as this happens. You should remember that the non-dualistic schools declare that consciousness never transforms, it never moves into time and space, it never acts, it doesn't think, it's always the same, ever pure, ever free, never bound, homogeneous mass of pure conscious awareness, which is this ocean, and that you dissolve into. But when you solidify, this is the process by which you'll do it. And the only question is, am I going to solidify ignorantly, or am I going to solidify remembering my own awareness, what I experienced in Brahman? That's why some souls are born pure and perfect and other souls aren't. Ultimately, they're all pure and perfect, but those who didn't remember it can't declare that. You don't see people coming out of the womb and saying, I am Brahman. And even the seers here on this earth take a little while to remember what just happened to them, because it's very thick here. The curtain of nescience, we call that, very thick to remember your true nature. That's why they say, get yourself a guru and get a mantra right away. Even the illumined souls do that, you may have noticed. Not just the ignorant or the seekers, the aspirants that do that. In fact, you're kind of having a hard time getting them to do that. But there's no convincing the realized soul who finds himself here. They're going to go find a teacher, and they're going to go get a mantra, and they're going to keep up a practice. So keep Maya at bay. All the awareness in them comes back. Why? Because yoga says all knowledge lies within you. Yeah, so education is the manifestation of knowledge already within you, Vivekananda says. And religion is the expression of divinity already within you. This is how they think. Others are thinking, cart before the horse, and they turn the whole thing around and put it right. I am pure and perfect. Later on I became a sinner. It's not like I'm born in sin and I had to somehow purify myself. I am that ultimate reality. I and my Father are one, and be thee perfect, to know that. So those things are taken very seriously by beings who have actually experienced that's the case. So they're coming back into the body for who knows what reason. They can come back to sport, as Sri Ramakrishna said, sport in pure awareness, because it's very blissful then. They can come back to help others, which they probably do anyway if they come to sport, just by a matter of their own appearance. They can come back for many reasons in that way, like for the Loka Sangraha, Krishna says. So as they do, they're going to have to take on bodies like the rest of us. So the subtle body here is defined in English, particles of conceptual thought projected as multiple expressions. So it's really not down to the individual level yet, it's more at a cosmic level, or let's call it collective level, where they'll take on a subtle body. And this is a good way of explaining what kinds of beings are at each of these levels that consciousness moves through. It's all not so cut and dried, and it's not all so fully explained in this. These are ideas, dharmic teachings that give you an idea of what to meditate on, open yourself up to. So some channels will start moving from your outer world to your inner world, and you will get an inner life. And you can have some experiences that are subtle and insightful rather than just pleasurable or painful. Back and forth. So that's the subtle body. Now again, we're calling it astral body because we're putting that in between the physical body, but look how it's defined. It's not like the old 60s astral projection where you're just looking down on yourself because you smoked some marijuana, or you're looking down in a hospital bed because you died for a little bit and then got back in the body. That's astral projection. But the astral body means a kind of celestial body that you take on after a subtle body. Particles of desire-based thought caught in dream states and fantasy and fantasizing. Here's where Sankalpa really becomes a Sanskrit word that takes on a lot of meaning. There are people who will see the worlds forming and they'll desire them. The difference between them and the realized souls, they'll see those words forming and they won't desire them. That's very aptly put, and a really good, simple way of saying it. If desire is present, then they're falling into Maya. And if desire is not present in them, then they're seeing Brahman all the time. So that's a very important juncture, as you can see, that if you're seeing occult powers, if you're attracted to sensational things, if you like mystery mongering, if you want to be a king or someone to dominate over others, a great explorer and discoverer of how much power there is in a single atom. If you want all that, that's desire. Like my teacher once said, if you want the world, you get Rolls Royces. But if you want God, you get peace. So power for the deluded soul, peace for the realized soul is always the case. And there's a big split division there, right at that body. Coming down further is the physical body. Particles of dense mental vibration congealed into objects. Of course, this definition brought to my mind by Holy Mother's teaching, Sri Sharda Devi, when she said, objects are just thought made manifest. So that's just a simple way of putting it, but very striking, that you haven't looked at it that way your whole life until she finally came along and said that to you. Objects are just thought made manifest. So you're looking at your own thought here. The world is just the outside version of your interior mind. And that's why you can't blame God for all the evil or praise him for all the good, because it's your mind that's done all that. The mind contains good and evil, and mixed. Just look at your own karmas to find that out. So don't drag God into this mess, please. And so many questions confuse and take people in the wrong direction and make them embittered, or fight against the devil, some crusade or war, or blame God for something, or praise God for it all, when that God you're praising is your very own self, and you're not seeing it that way. You're projecting things over it. So consciousness with veils projected over it is the business of Maya. Consciousness stripped clean of those projections is Brahman in the human form, like an avatar. They're the same here as they are here. And when they take on the 5 sheaths, or the 3 worlds, or the 5 akashas, it doesn't change them in one iota. In fact, they're just as willing, or more so, to give you the Dharma as they were in a higher realm. And then you see how it just dovetails so nicely, the particles, mental vibration, just right back into the nanometers. The particles of physical come into your cognizance. Like, one way you could say that is very nice is Kanta kita tanumana nirave dasevayan tarjvali chayapate sparshadara chamvite punya bhumi uheahi punaha naranarayan punya bhumi uheaji punaha naranarayan. Stimita chit sindhu bedi uti loki jyoti gana koti surya galai chanchadara kanti jeno. arose from the depths of timeless awareness, a magnificent mass of radiant effulgence, piercing the surface of the serene ocean of consciousness. It is as if that resplendent form has been fashioned by lovingly melting 1 billion suns in a mold. This golden child whispered to the great seers, "The ark of the world is sinking in the vain dream of pleasure and greed." The seer gazed in delight, thrilled in mind and soul, face radiant yet serene. Then, traveling along the shining star-strewn path, they enter the realm of Maya. Behold, the divine and his companion have descended today into this holy land. Our teacher's teacher, Swami Shardananda, wrote this hymn, Stimita chit sindhu bedi, from the ocean of divine, the depths of consciousness, a magnificent mass of light took form. See? So then when it gives up the form, it'll just dissolve all the particles, all the worlds back into itself, from which it all came. And when it wants to take a form again, it'll travel along the shining star-strewn path. Where's that? Physical universe. It'll come into the physical universe, but nobody knows from whence it comes, except the realized souls. And nobody knows how it sloughs off the form. And then on top of that, nobody knows how nothing ever happened as it did it. It's like getting into a projection of your own mind and then giving it up. Nothing changed in you. The star-strewn path is a projection of Maya. Beautiful, fantastic, sensational, mystical. Look how many great souls. See, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, one ray of wisdom from the Divine Mother of the universe stuns 1,000 scholars. One ray of wisdom of she who holds all this within her, the Shakti of Brahman, who has some sort of commerce with form where it doesn't. Just one ray of wisdom, like, say, Saturn's rings, or the power in an atom, will stun 1,000 scholars. And for 100 years or more, they'll be babbling about it, like chickens cackling on the barnyard floor after the hatching of a bunch of insects. Because how many billions of wisdom rays does she have to share with us? Well, on the physical universe alone, there'll be so many. That's why they get trapped by them. They get attracted to them. They get attached to them, and they come back again and again for them. But the one who knows that they're empty, not attracted to them anymore, but will deign to come down and inform us how empty they are. Oh, why are you suffering, my child, so much? See, why are you weeping tears on your own divine feet? Advaita says. Don't you know that all this is ephemeral and transitory? That it all came out of you? When you lose it, it's in you. You can have it again if you want it. But I'll show you a higher way beyond mental projection. And I'll show you a better realm inside of you, a higher place to be, where things are held in abeyance, where your intelligence is king, not your ego. And you can dwell in subtle bliss there. And if you want, you can meditate and diffuse everything. All particles gone. All objects gone first, and then the particles that formed them at 5 different levels in 5 different Russian dolls, all gone. Inside, back into yourself. So this is what a simple song can illustrate to you, or a simple dharmic chart, 8 by 11, blown up to 24 by 36, that contains a very minimal part of what the entire process of each of these designates. But to meditate upon them then is the means for enlightenment and means for illumination. Really getting back to your own best, highest, truest way of thinking. Or not thinking, as the case may be. remember the founder of SRB, Lex Sixon, said that to me once. This poem you just wrote is the best of thinking. No, I take that back. It's the best of non-thinking. You had to think a little bit, put it together and arrange it and everything, but the actual thing was all intelligent particles. And it wasn't your doing, it was Divine Mother's rays of wisdom that gave it to you. See? She had to have some open channels through which to do that, so each soul that awakens to its own divine potential and maybe won't want to hold it in abeyance anymore, or want to make this trip one more time, make this outward trajectory one more time, and do it all right this time. Live a life which is beneficial to yourself and to all other beings, as the peace chant of the Upanishad says. So souls are coming back for that reason too then. This time I think I'll get it right. Oops. Go back to the drawing board. This time I think I'll get it right. See? And they do. Remember it was just, was it this series? Just a few weeks ago we had Sri Krishna's, yes, it was the first class of the series when Krishna was talking about the 7 ways in which a soul comes back to earth. Grabs the thread of his yoga, then after that he's born in a pious family, transcends ritualists and gets a hold of higher intelligence, just like this, only from the soul dynamic. Well, this is rather from the soul dynamic too, and this is more like from the standpoint of lokas, worlds, and the channels they travel along. So let's look at that in the remaining time then. Over here rather, is this chart we can show again. We also pick this up every once in a while and look at it, just to give us, again, a sort of ideology about these worlds. This is based more on the 7 chakras, so Kundalini is shooting, Shakti is shooting throughout this. You can see by her beautiful visage there that she's at the center of this. So she's the 5th Russian doll, is Brahman and Shakti. She's representing that, and she's already at a realm of formless form. And so she does permeate and bisect this realm of form and formless form. She'll carry on from this chakra down to these chakras and be present more as her revealed self and then her hidden self. And finally she's like patina and copper. So this chart is there with its various teachings. Prajna Upanishad says, in the heart dwells the Atman. There are 101 nerves centered there, and in each of those are 100 more, and each of these branch into 72,000 other nadis. Nadis are channels. In all of those, Shakti power flows. So then I looked in my heart with my scalpel, said the doctor, the surgeon, and they didn't find these channels. I don't see them. A couple of chambers in there and so forth, a lot of cells, a lot of particles, if I look deeper, but I didn't find these subtle passageways. So obviously then you better look for subtler particles and go into meditation and dissolve the physical particles and take on the idea of a heart, not an anatomical heart, but an atmic heart. So here you move from atomic to atmic. Now you're going to have to move from atomic to from anatomical to atmic. See, and then you'll find in your meditation, your consciousness is running along rivers, just like water is running along canyons. What's there is also here. So out there is the gross. And that should be telling you, like it did Ramakrishna or the Advaita. Everything there is Brahman telling me something. If I see the ocean and the beach, other people are rushing towards it with sailboats and beach balls and umbrellas and mai tais. But when the Advaita sees the beach, he sees the ocean of intelligence. He sees the waves are beings being born and dying inside of the ocean of intelligence. He sees that the waves are water, and that they lose their form and gain it again, back and forth. He sees so many things that everyone else looking at the ocean and the beach does not see. He sees the grains of sand on the beach, as numerous as those in the sky. He thinks of the scriptures where they mention that. And he's going there for bliss, not happiness. For the sake of his Purusha, not for the sake of his pleasure. So he's seeing everything as divine, not demoniacal. All absolute, not relative. And so that rare soul walking along the beach, like Swami Vivekananda did when he swam out to Cape Comorin, down out to the island before he came west to share this with us. So you can see that all of this is Mother Shakti's realm in this chart, and that quote from the Prajna Upanishad gives us a good start. Now, at the bottom, Svetasvatara Upanishad puts it differently, and some of you can chant this with me. Om Ara Eva Ratanabal Samhatra Yatra Nadyaha Sa Esham Chastarate Buhura Jaya Manaha Om Midyevam Jayatha Atmanam Svasti Vaha Parayaha Tamasa Parastat. So basically, there in the heart, where all the subtle nerve endings meet, abides the Atman. Stationary but becoming manifold. A nice way of putting it. It's motionless, yet its presence causes all motion in other things. Meditate upon that self as Om. That is the word. See, so you want to get to that beautiful level of consciousness. The word Om. Meditate on yourself as Om, and Godspeed you in crossing over to the farthest shore beyond all darkness. Well, here's those first three chakras we were talking about in the first half, how eating, drinking, and sensuality and sense life takes over the beings that are at these. These are all the nadis, the different inner channels that are flowing. Down here they would be more outer channels, some of them even going towards the lower patalas, or hell, which is a dream of hell. That is, a soul that dies in a very bad position, has bad experiences after death, calls it hell, and then climbs out of that and gets a human birth again if it's lucky, or hopefully, if not, it might take on an animal birth, they say. So, all due to perverse thinking that it had in its life, because there's no actual hell and there's no actual heaven. These are all realms inside of your own consciousness. It's your mind that's the important thing, Holy Mother said. You have to take that mind to Brahman with you, so keep it in a good state. She said, and eventually it'll dissolve, because we know particles do, into laya, chintaya, that is, devolve into consciousness. But in the meantime, you need the mind. You have to know it's not the brain first, that the mind is the kingdom of heaven within. Then you have to keep it in fine fetal shape so that it can take you without impediment and without false thinking, mityagan, to this ultimate reality that is your own nature. You've taken on a mind, so you have to keep it in good shape. Keep it pure, keep it inward moving, keep it introspective, contemplative, meditative, all different levels of particle, you see, that you master. So, otherwise it can fall into these lower states. Now you see there, Bhur Bhuva Swaha are pretty much aligned. There's the way that the three of those dolls, Russian dolls we were just looking at, come about and connect with each other. Realm of the humans, animals, insects, and plants. The realm of the ancestors, realm of the celestials is how we could put that in English. These three inner worlds, three lower chakras. And then you can see over here this myriad souls wandering in ignorance. This diagram represents Maya. Their souls are going from these worlds into a clouded mental state and having to be reborn in these worlds again. That's called transmigration of souls. Here at the bottom, this triple line is a Brahmagranthi. Very hard for beings to awaken Kundalini Mother here, but that's where she's rooted, at the base of the human spine. So it's a very important thing. You can't just look at the lower chakra and say, that's eating, or that's anger, or that's passion. You have to look at it and say, that's the potential for divinity. Mother is camped there, but the spring is coiled up. I have to release that spring, and she'll take me to the highest Brahman. She likes to do that because Shiva's waiting. So Shakti will make the inner journey. You just need to hold on to her skirts, like a child does. Pull itself up by the mother's skirts. So you have to awaken that. That's your responsibility to do that. To acknowledge her, to love her with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, so she will rise to Shiva and take you with her. Holy Mother, when she was living, said that once to someone. She said, "Oh, you don't like it here? Well, then come with me. You don't have to stay here." So she meant, come with me inward in meditation and give up your body when I do, and follow me to Sharda-loka, to Ramakrishna Loka. It would be fun to try and locate that somewhere here, because it has a little form left to it. Sort of like the Vaishnavas like to see Vishnu and the Shaivites like to see Shiva, you see. So there you see, without going into a great explanation, a lot of these three lower worlds, channels. And you see here, path of the moon, and if you can pierce this Vishnu Granthi, the path of the sun begins. This is Chit Shakti, pervasive pranic fields. So everything is made out of her intelligence. But that intelligence becomes dimmer and dimmer, grosser and grosser, as the mind falls from its original thinking, its original non-thinking, if we were just putting it that way. So basically this says here, impenetrable without real love. So they say this third heaven, this higher heaven, if you don't really love God, and you love the world more, love of the world will pull you back down to the world. You'll be born in a womb without a view. But if you love God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul, you can penetrate this Vishnu Granthi and see this arrow here going to the heart chakra. That's where I was saying earlier, all war, all violence, all enmity dies there, and you just see Brahman. You know how Sri Ramakrishna put that? When this heart chakra opens up, he hears the sound of Om, and he says, "Oh, what is this? What is this?" And he's never the same again. So this is a very important Granthi knot to penetrate. So you can see some of these channels move through that Granthi. There are ways of getting through that Granthi from, like, say, here's the ocean of occult light. So you get out of the desire for the occult, the metaphysical, and you can work your way toward this heart chakra. Your love of God outstrips your love of power, basically, is what happens. That's a quote from Patanjali, and Swami Vivekananda used to love to quote it. He was quoting in terms of Rainkhata virtues. When a man gives up his attraction for the occult powers, then he gets the Rainkhata virtues. Patanjali said that in the Yoga Sutras. Vivekananda quoted that then, 1800 years later, 1700 years later, and brought it to us. So you give up your love for occult powers, that's power, domination, and power inside the atoms, and, to domineer over others with the power of the atom would be a classic occult power attraction. So you penetrate that by your love of God, and you could reach the heart chakra. And so some of these channels bump against the Vishnu Granthi and just lead back to the world. So they can't penetrate it because they don't have real love yet. You get real love by wisdom. That is, wisdom purifies. Nahi ginena sudrishyam pavitramiha vidyate. Knowledge purifies, Krishna says in Gita, and then you get real love, and by that you can come to me. There's the Vishnu Granthi right there, so you come to Vishnu. And you can go deeper and deeper, all the way to his very world. See it here, Vaikuntha? Or if you're a Shaivite, you can go right to Kailash, Shiva's world. If you're a worshipper of Divine Mother, particularly, you can go to Mani Dvipa, the jewel island of essence, which is my other name for the big island. I like to look at Big Island as Mani Dvipa, her jewel island of essence. So that's the path of the sun you're talking about there, we said. Shakti still pervades everything. It's a matter of how revealed she's getting due to the refinement of your own mind's consciousness. And that's up to you to do that, we said. She'll give you all the keys to do it. You must follow. Now you've got these other 4 worlds, which I mentioned that weren't on the last chart, because there are 7 worlds. I said 3 of them are always warring. But when you reach the heart chakra, you've reached Maharloka, Janaloka, Taparloka, Brahmaloka. Actually, they were on the Russian doll's chart we looked at by association. You can see these happen to connect with the Gyanakasha, the ocean of wisdom. Here's an ocean of sorrow. There's an ocean of occult light. But here's the ocean of wisdom. So Mother is leading you to this very profound ocean of all knowledge lies within you. And you transcend the ocean of sorrowless light when you penetrate the Vishnu Granthi. These are all, of course, have some esoteric Sanskrit words to them, but as a view, sort of a template of what the worlds inside are like, this is a general representation. What else is there for us to look at? Ecstatic souls sporting in consciousness. That would be called Leela. So there are many souls who just love to sport in these worlds, these fine worlds, with the Ishvara forms that they cherished back on earth. They made the grade. They loved so much that their love helped them penetrate, and they are now with their ideals, sporting in consciousness. Leela, it's called. Leelik Sankalpa, down here was Mayak Sankalpa, as Lord Vashishta used to teach. So these upper worlds have channels leading in and out of them too, all the way to Brahmaloka, which is the 7th world where these very high souls exist. At that place you can see the nadis are becoming less. They're just pretty much 1 or 2 or 3 channels. This kind of means these lotuses have certain limited amount of petals now. That is until you get to there, which is thousands and thousands of petals again, of all of a blissful type. But they're thinning out here, the nadis. They're roads less traveled, you see. Just be like you're driving down here on Highway 19, and then all of a sudden you take the road up to Mauna Loa. You see, all of a sudden, fewer people, fewer cars, and the elevation is getting hard to breathe. You know why? The people aren't up there. So in spiritually speaking, you're going higher and higher in spiritual elevation, rather. And there's the Rudra Granthi, very hard again to, in a subtle way, to penetrate that. Even these worlds, these that are very high, are just short of Rudra Granthi, because Rudra Granthi will be where the avatar comes from, and it'll be a realm of formless form. So look over here, you take on form here. Does it sound familiar? Look back at the atomic particle descent, taking on form, and then here your different levels of taking on form happen, from formless to causal to subtle to gross, as we said. And here is giving up form. So taking on form on one side has to do with this Rudra Granthi. Giving it up has to do with penetrating it. And only certain souls can do that. When Ramakrishna said, I run a boat race between these 3 chakras, he was one of those souls that could easily pass through a subtle Granthi like that. Have access to the 1,000-petal lotus, Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Came back down a little, all of a sudden he was at the 2-petaled. Then speaking to the devotees from here, he said, I had to come down this far, and then to see the devotees I had to come here. So he was taking on and giving up form, all from a very high level. Now, these final quotes, no, I didn't cover this yet. Here's the great Mahatmas, Nityasiddhas, and Videhamuktis, gone and gone forever. See, they realized the true nature, like hailstones into the ocean, give it up, and merge into Divine Mother's highest, best, deepest of all worlds, or you could say even beyond worlds. Now here's some indications of how the Upanishads describe this. Within the recess of the heart is the akasha of consciousness, with its many openings, shaped like the calyx of a lotus. in which all universes exist. So the lotus isn't just some borrowed word. You see, Padma and so forth. It's actually the shape of these higher worlds where that nectar drips off of them, and you can collect that nectar and take it down this process into the lower worlds and give it to people. Dharma would be a form of that nectar that you're getting, that's straight from Mother's own highest calyx of the lotus. Another quote here says, that individual soul is as subtle as a hairpoint divided and subdivided hundreds of times. So we know what the measurement of a piece of hair is, right? In microns and even nanometers. Probably nanometers won't cut it. So we have to measure that in microns, the old style physics. But so now they're saying that soul is like a hairpoint divided 100 times or more. You know, it's so subtle like that, so minute as far as space goes, so vast as far as inner space goes. So this way in which they try and put it into words for us, first Sanskrit, now English. We're trying to do our best in these other languages of the world to explain these very esoteric and abstruse teachings from India. This is nice because it's more poetic. Bathe at the most sacred confluence of holy rivers found within the precious human body where the three spiritual nerve currents meet. Ida, Pingala, and Sahasrara. So they have these, the spine is a physical representation of those three, which are at a more subtle level, but there's the Ida and the Pingala are wrapping around the spine, sort of like a snake like the old doctor's staff, you see. So you've got the Ida, which is like female energy and male energy, Pingala going up this staff. It's like this two great currents going up, two of the sacred rivers, going along this main river, which is the Sushumna. And so consciousness rises when it's called through these granthis up those you can see representations of them right there, wrapping around the central channel, until they get so subtle that they meet at that sixth chakra, right there at the Agya chakra, the third eye, the Jnana Chakshu. So a quick whirlwind tour through lokas, nadis, and the transmigration of souls. Transmigrations of souls all really being a myth in consciousness. Soul never moves, but when it does divide itself into many parts, takes on the idea of two-ness, you see how it happens. The only real question is, or the only real issue is, I should do it in consciousness, not in ignorance. And that's why when Swami Vivekananda had given all these teachings to us in the West in 1893, shared the Dharma with us so much, then someone came up and asked him at a gathering afterwards, well then, should a man take on a body? Should he come here and enjoy life and incarnate? And Swamiji had a great answer. He said, I certainly hope he does not until he can do so in full consciousness. So there was a man living in full consciousness, standing in front of the questioner as that representative, and lived 39 years and gone, like the Homer bird's egg falling toward earth, and just hatched and left. So the man was wondering, and you probably wondered yourself, well, life is good, most of the time. And if I live a dharmic life, if I'm really careful, I can fulfill my desires here and so forth. And then it's a question of, do I want to come back and do it all again when I've got higher attainment, or is there any point to it? Or maybe things will change when you're a little older and you'll be more put to the test, and the dark night of the soul will come upon you like it did on other great souls, and there's all that to consider. So Swamiji's final answer is, I certainly hope you will not come back here again in the body, not take on atomic particles anymore, until you can do so in full consciousness. And so that would be a great master to do maybe even a past master. So there may be enough time, actually 15 or 20 minutes, to show you a fourth chart. This might be a record that I've been able to show 4 old war horses. It was really major, big guns, you say. Military have their big guns, but so does the Dharmic military. So you can see this classic chart of dissolution of the mind stream, which is one of the ways that yoga and Vedanta proposes that you meditate. You'll have a nice issue of Nectar coming up where we will have some articles on meditation in Vedanta specifically. And maybe you might even see this chart if it hasn't already in a past issue of Nectar. But basically, Yoga and Vedanta says this, and it's here at this bottom quote: "The classic and comprehensive meditation in Yoga and Vedanta dissolves the elements into the senses into the subtle elements into the prana into the mind into the great mind, and the great mind into Om, the word. Find Om in the self, Atman, and then dissolve that self into the great self, Brahman." Very nicely put, and it follows Samkhya, it follows Yoga, it follows Vedanta, it follows the 5 Russian dolls, it follows the iceberg, it follows the lokas, nadis, and worlds. And it does so by way of a practice that the individual can do. So some of my students have taken this up, and I've watched them over years practice it. It's a sort of a more filled in and complete version of saying, "Who am I?" or saying, "I'm not the body." Naham. Naham, Kaham, and Saham, as we were saying in the first half. So you would prove that to yourself by this. Because my point is that when you see the 24 cosmic principles, which are right here, these basically, you can see 10, 15, 20 of them right there, and then 24 here. When you see them, what you don't realize is that the karmas are lurking in them. Where are your karmas? Is a good question to ask. Well, they're in earth, they're in water, they're in fire, they're in air, they're in ether, they're in tasting, they're in touching, they're in seeing, they're in smelling, they're in feeling, they're in subtle senses in your dream tonight, more karma. See? So when you meditate on them, that's how you'll expunge your karma, because you'll come upon, when you meditate on water, the fear of water, because you died in a past lifetime. So then you'll meditate on water, get rid of your fear of it. Because if you know that you died in water last lifetime, you'll know that you're still here. So you never really died, did you? Poof, the karma of fear goes away right then. Oh, I see, I'm indestructible. Water could kill me. Fire can't burn me. Spears can't cleave me. Arrows can't pierce me. Who am I quoting? Sri Krishna in the Gita to Arjuna, who was going into battle. Go and do your job as a warrior out there. Dissolve all these forms. They'll do it anyway on their own eventually, so you might as well help them a little early. Win the day. Because know that in every one of those elephants, and every one of those chariots, and every one of those princes, and every one of those warriors, the Atman abides in all of them, and it cannot be drowned, it cannot be burnt, it cannot be cleaved, it cannot be run over, it can't be stamped on by an elephant, and so forth and so on. Even your arrows, Arjuna, as masterful as you are, cannot kill it. So that's, of course, leading right into Ajativada, one of the greatest teachings of India. Ajativada means no birth, no death. There's no jati for you, no birth, no death. You're never born into a caste or a station of life. That's what you assumed, you see. You thought you were a doctor, you thought you were a lawyer, you thought you were a warrior, you thought you were a merchant. That was your dream. If the dream was done in consciousness, you mastered doctoring, lawyering, warrioring. If it was done in ignorance, you have to come back and do it again and again. Why? Because you were on the battlefield, which is land, earth, and you were You were shooting arrows and spears made of earth through the air, and you were creating karma as you did that by killing others with those very things. So karma is in earth, karma is in water, karma is in air. So when you meditate upon them, then you see that. That's where your karmas are lurking. You see, not many teachings will give you that idea. You're just supposed to dissolve the mind. I'm not this, I'm not that. Why are you doing that? And then what is it that I can't do it? The karmas keep coming back and keeping me from doing that, keeping me from enlightenment. Well, take up the 24 cosmic principles and dissolve them by looking into them. How? Well, by looking at them in the waking state, looking at them in the dreaming state, and looking at them in the deep sleep state. And the deeper and better you can do that, the quicker and faster they'll go away. In deep sleep, of course, they're gone already. Why do they come dancing back, would be the question there. I went into deep sleep. Well, I didn't see the seeds for my karma and burn them. I strew them again in the next lifetime, unburned, with the power for germination. But when I saw Mother's ocean of Jnana, I transcended the ocean of karma and went beyond the occult power ocean. Then I knew I had the power of fire, so I burnt the seeds in my deep sleep state, and they never germinated again. So karmas bring people back. Karmas and desires are at the root, and basically those two play with each other. Karmas, desires, samskaras. Those are the three causes for people's rebirth. Actually, pretty much just explained the whole chart, but in the remaining minutes, we can look. 5 elements go into the 10 senses, right? That is 5 gross elements and 5 gross senses go into the subtle senses and subtle elements. And we have charts on each individual conjunction of these. You know that earth goes with smell, and water goes with taste, and fire goes with sight, and so forth. So you're going to connect these. So you could meditate on earth, air, fire, water, and ether and say, well, my karmas didn't all go away, I did that. Well, did you connect earth to smell? Because maybe you came back here because of some nice smell. That's your karma. Or some bad smell. The smell of carnage and war became a samskara in my mind. I wanted to come back and smell it again. The taste of cocaine shot into my veins in my mouth became a desire, so I had to come back and experience it again. You see, so you just have to look into it deep enough and open your mind a bit to see how these are connected. And they're also connected in good ways. That is, if you don't have to come back and experience the 5 senses and the 5 elements again, then you've expunged those karmas. You don't have those desires anymore. The senses can't beckon you back and hold you. Then you have the subtle senses, you see, so the prana connects you to the subtle senses. So prana then, a very important teaching again, which we've taken up before. And there you have earth and smell connecting with odor, water and taste connecting with flavor, fire and sight connecting with visibility, air and touch connecting with tangibility, ether and hearing connecting with audibility. So straight across the board, sorry the chart wasn't long enough to do it, but follow the little bouncing ball. Just follow the arrows. You can see how each one of these elements connect to gross senses, connect to subtle senses, and this is your makeup, the makeup of your psycho-physical being. Your gross and subtle body, basically, is there. So your 3 lower chakras, your waking, dreaming states are there. And you have to inspect that. Come to know of it, connect the nadis, see, and then find out what's there, master it, be done with it. And pass your time contentedly and be free. Anywhere you go, be free. Like Swamiji is saying to the man at the gathering. Don't come back here without, don't leave home without it. without the Atman. There's the life forces, prana, and then they connect to the fourfold mind, and I threw in psychic prana there too, which is another facet that's important. Swami Vivekananda mentioned that to us. Connect those to the Mahat, the great mind, which the quote down here told us to do. Great mind, what's in it? They say Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, what do? They project, they sustain, and they destroy or dissolve. All the worlds in name and form are under their thumb. See, and the gods and goddesses too. If you flip back the Russian dolls chart, you'll see they all fall under the auspice of the Trinity. And the Trinity is there with Om. And Mother's controlling Om. See? So in that case then you can see how Indra, the god of gods, has to look up to the Trinity and see a higher power. And so the cosmic mind, or Mahat, has all those in it. It also has the ideas of time and space and causation in it. It also has the seeds, which are in deep sleep for you, of solidity, liquidity, luminosity, homogeneity, and all-pervasiveness. That is, solidity will become the solid earth. Liquidity will become water. And luminosity will become billions of suns in the sky. Homogeneity will become atmospheres of air, and all-pervasiveness will become the five ethers. That's a seed out of which everything comes. You see how a tree is born out of a seed with many fruits on it, with many seeds again in it. So is it so hard to believe that inwardly the sources of what's out here physically are also that multifarious? Can't your consciousness follow that line of thinking and entertain it? Maybe find out a karma that's connected. In this case, that you can't get into formlessness because the Trinity's holding you back. Should you want to get into formlessness, there are beings that do. So the Mahat is a great station, the great it's called, means the great mind. Hiranyagarbha, Lord Brahma, Mahat, those are words used for that station where all mentation and all visualization and all imagination and all creation and all conceptualization begin as seeds. Brahma just has to wake up on Vishnu's lotus, look at the lotus and start everything rolling again by saying Dayu Shantihi Antariksham Shantihi Prativi Shantihi Apaho Shantihi Oshadaya Shanti. He'll say the words, the seeds of power, and water, earth, fire, and ether, and all those are contained in solidity, liquidity, and so forth. So uttering them at the beginning of a long cycle of time, they will begin. Just like scientists are saying this began on a physical level. We're not arguing with science that physical realm has an evolution, but the soul was observing that happening because it came out of the soul. They're not providing for consciousness, for awareness, for a witness consciousness, or for a soul. The most important things to philosophy and religion, not being provided for. Second most important, that once I've taken this merry-go-round called evolution, I can involute back to my source. You're saying there's no source? Or that I was born from a big bang, a sun blowing up or something? Oh, the suns are in me, in the form of luminosity that's in Lord Brahma. So I can trace my ancestors back to Lord Brahma. I was never an ape. An ape was a dream I had. Ask Tarzan. He had it in a big way. If you take on from the Mahat, then the word shows up. Pranava, or call it Shabda Brahma, the God as sound. So sound has been the most ether, hearing, audibility. Sound has been going all the way along that trajectory as the subtlest of all elements, all senses. And you'll know that when you hear the word humming inside you like 1,000 bumblebees, as they say, and have that experience of Om, like Ramakrishna said. Then the man said, oh, I reached this chakra, and I said, what's that? What's that? Saw the light, heard the sound. When that happens, then find Om, the word, inside of the Atman, and find the Atman inside the Great Self, the true Self, and then the Great Self. And then you come to full involution and transcendence, Kaivalya, dissolution of particles, putting all the 5 dolls back away and not playing with them anymore again. Dissolving yourself, and along with space and time, which is all inside of you, back into one homogeneous mass of pure conscious awareness. And here we end our 4th class on the topic of form and formlessness, and we'll end it here with a Sanskrit chant. Om Tachnayo, Om Tachnayo Ravrini Mahe Gatung Yagyaya Gatung Ye Nupataye Daivi Swastarastu Naha Swastir Manusebhyaha Urdhvam Jagatu Pesajam Samno Astu Dvipade Samjatushpate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we make a great offering into the great self, from the small self into the indivisible self. May we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices, and always delight in this offering. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace be unto the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity then also abide among us. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari